Today we're going to be looking at Psalm 14. We're not going to look at the whole psalm for this short lesson today, but I want us to highlight the first 3 verses of Psalm 14. The psalm begins by saying, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." A lot of times we quote this part of the first verse to make a point about the foolishness of atheism. There's a big difference between someone who says that I don't know if there's a God and someone who boldly says that there is no God. The first person just says, well, I haven't been convinced of evidence or received evidence to convince me that there's a God. The second person says that I don't have evidence, and there could not be any evidence that could ever prove that there's a God. That person is basically saying they know everything, and there's nothing that is unknown to them, and so because they know everything, they know that there is no God. That is a foolish idea and a foolish position for one to be in, to boldly say that there is no God. That's why the psalmist says that it is the fool who says in his heart, there is no God. But what we need to understand is that that verse is not in isolation, or really that's part of a verse. It's not isolated. It is in a context. And so there's an important lesson as we go and continue reading in Psalm 14. The psalmist said, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have committed abominable deeds. There is no one who does good. The Lord has looked down from heaven upon the sons of men to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one." Now I think we read through this and think, well, I could see that with someone who has rejected God. They're going to be corrupt. They're not going to follow in the ways of God because they've rejected Him. And that's true. But what's interesting there is that the psalmist, as he writes here about people who have turned aside, they've become corrupt. There is no one who does good. Paul quoted this among several other passages in the Old Testament in Romans chapter 3, where he described the sinful condition of the people of God, of all men, but included the people of God, that they were in sin. They had violated the law of God. He would go on to make the point in Romans 3:23 that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But in verses 10 through 18, he quotes several Old Testament passages. Verse 12 is a quote from here in Psalm 14, where the psalmist says, "They have turned aside, together they have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, there is not even one." We can recognize the fault of one who boldly says there is no God. We can see that. We understand that's foolish. But how foolish is it for those of us who affirm our belief in God and then live in such a way that we act like there is no God, where we become corrupt, where we don't do what is right, we don't do what is good, we sin and fall short of the glory of God. The psalmist's point there is that just as we can see how foolish it is for someone to boldly say there is no God, when we as God's people who know that there is a God and know the law that God has given, and we still violate it and we still refuse to follow the law of God, that is foolish. And so this passage is not just about the foolishness of atheism. This is about the foolishness of the people who believe in God, but then don't submit to His will, don't follow His will. So I want us to think about this passage and examine ourselves, look at ourselves. Do we believe in God? We ought to believe in God. There's plenty of evidence to prove that there is a God, that God does exist, that He created us, that He made this world around us. If we believe in God, let's live as though we believe in God. Let's look to His commandments, follow His word, obey His will, and not just become corrupt and sinful and as if there is no God and there is no accountability before God. Let's remember that there is a God, and let's follow Him in all that we do.